hi, it's 11 o'clock, and I hope I'm coming through, but I have no idea. So if you're out there, hello. Feel free to leave questions in the sidebar here, and I will do my best to answer them as we go. I'm just going to type in here in the sidebar in case I'm not coming through. So yeah, do let me know if I'm not coming through, and I'll see what I can do here on my end to correct for that. But today I'm hoping to talk about our last year of growing food for ourselves. I'm looking at the stream here and it doesn't look like I'm coming through. Why is that? Technology, right? This makes everything so much nicer. At least I can come try and get online here and try and tell you about what we've been doing. Usually every year at the expo I'm able to give, last year I gave 4 presentations and it went great. So it's been why is this not done? Now I see what the problem is. The live stream is significantly behind when I actually say these things. So I have about a 2-minute. So if that's why I'm a little slow in responding, that's what's going on. And then we'll get going. All right, since we are going here, we might as well get started and cross our fingers and hope for the best for the technology to continue to function smoothly. So this last year, my family and I decided to try something out, and that was what would happen if fossil fuels disappeared. What if we had some sort of societal crash? And we started talking about doing this in November of 2018. And that 2019, and then in January and February of 2020 we started planning this, and I actually announced this at last year's Garden Expo in a number of presentations, and I previewed our video series Foodmageddon that we put out. And what happened was the coronavirus hit, and we actually had a real life pandemic, a real life problem. You all probably remember trying to go to the grocery store and not having a lot of shelf stable goods. Well, that fit right into our scenario. So I'm just going to pull up here there we go. So we had this plan going forward, and then coronavirus hit, and it actually started to happen. So we had to make do with what we could actually get. And the whole premise of Foodmageddon was seeing how much of our own food we could grow. So obviously gardening was going to be a really big part of that. And again, the Low Technology Institute, which you can find at lowtechinstitute.org, or if you're on YouTube right now, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. Our basic premise is that we're going to run out of fossil fuels someday, so we might as well be thinking today about how we're going to feed ourselves, house ourselves, and clothe ourselves when fossil fuels are no longer available. So instead of just sitting there and thinking, well, how would we feed ourselves, we actually tried it. So we came up with a plan that every month starting in February we would lose things that are dependent on fossil fuels in our food system. And so in February, this is when the disaster actually started, right? This is when we had to start thinking about, okay, how are we going to plan for a year without food, or without being able to go to the grocery store whenever we want. And so this was when we started ordering things online. This is when we started ordering seeds. Luckily, we were a month ahead of the curve in ordering seeds. If you ordered garden seeds last year, you know that everything ran out early because everyone decided to garden. Luckily, we did it in February. And within the confines of the Foodmageddon project, we treated it as if it was really happening. We had rules that I'm going to get into in a minute, and we had to get everything ahead of time. And so we were lucky in that we just happened to be ahead of the curve. So in February, things were generally as usual. We could go to the grocery store. We could, order things on Amazon, all that. But by March, we had to cut our gas because if fossil fuels disappeared, gas use would become expensive. And also, we'd start having trouble getting petroleum transported, things at the grocery store, so fresh things. So we started going to the grocery store less. By April, we could not buy fresh produce at all. So we couldn't buy lettuce, tomatoes, asparagus, things like that. But most of the other stuff would still be available at the grocery store in this scenario that we created. By May, we needed to simulate that prices would be going up on everything. So we cut our food budget in a quarter. And we could only go to the grocery store less often, like the previous months. Obviously, we couldn't get any perishable foods at this point. By June, we would be seeing serious disruptions of the food system, and so we only had one food-related trip to the grocery store this month, and we could only buy shelf-stable goods. By July, no more gas was available for going to the grocery store, so I had to ride my bike, and it's a 6-mile round trip on country roads, so that was a lot of fun. And our food was, our budget was quite low, and again, non-perishables only. By August, we only went once, and we weren't able to buy any of the usual grocery stuff, only kind of bottom of the barrel. If you've ever had to go shopping when the shelves are bare, there's one can of, random soup and, bags of random dried goods. That's basically, we had to simulate that. So we only went once in August, and we haven't been to the grocery store since. And we just stopped Foodmageddon here in February, now that it's been a year since we started, and we're still actually sailing through with plenty of food stores. So we'll get to that later. But the basic idea is we're here, some of the rules. I want to talk about some of the rules here. So we were, just pulling this up here, sorry. Never mind the man behind the curtain here. Sorry about that. Thought I had everything pulled up, but I guess I didn't. Let's see. Let me just double check, see if there's any questions in the sidebar. Hey! Oh, hey, Two Ferns. And thank you. Good. I'm glad you see to ask questions here in the corner. I will get to them as soon as I possibly can. Sorry for the delay of game here. Pulling up our rules. So basically, the parameters, we kind of set this out as a study. We had semblance of rigor in this. It's a one-off anecdotal scientific experiment, long-term questions. But so what we wanted to do was concentrate our growing on 1 acre, and our property is long and thin, and so only part of that is actually gardenable. The top part, or the kind of the middle part there that you see is tan. That's actually from all the straw mulch that we use on our garden beds. That's the full sun area. And so we only really had 1/3 of an acre in our property. And then our neighbors used to be market gardeners, and they let us have some space to grow field crops, potatoes, and we'll get into that in a minute. But basically, the idea was we didn't want to have 3-4 acres to grow on, because if there was some sort of catastrophe, you would only have a few acres in many parts of the country. If you live in suburbia or even in a city, turning parks and things into growing spaces, it's not going to be huge tracts of lands that are available. So we try to keep our footprint pretty small. We needed to grow and make all the food ourselves. So this was gardening, and then as far as animals go, we have chickens, and we also have venison out here in the country. So we were thinking about how are we going to grow 2 million calories, grow and harvest 2 million calories in a year. We were able to use anything from the surrounding area that we could get to by human-powered transportation. So there's an abandoned apple orchard less than a mile away that we were able to take advantage of as well. So these were some of the surplus foods that we were able to harvest from our surroundings. In this type of scenario, they very likely would have planted corn, soybeans, and wheat before the crash happened. So we had, if we wanted it, an unlimited supply of field corn and soybeans and wheat if we were to go harvest it. And that was a big if. We cooked and used our regular kitchen stuff. Because we have solar power, we would be able to use our solar-powered stuff, even if the electrical grid became spotty, which is lucky. Sidebar, I have family in Texas, in Austin, who just had a harrowing week of blackouts and no water, and they're still melting snow to get. It's still not out of the woods. It sounds like a mess down there. And it was frustrating for me to see officials blaming the infrastructure, the green infrastructure, the windmills and things like that. It's like, we have solar panels. We live in Wisconsin, which is much colder than Texas, and if our grid were to go down because of our solar panels, we would be the only house in town with electricity because we have a battery backup, and we can live on that if we need to. So it was a little frustrating for me to see them talking about that, but that's an aside. So in addition to not purchasing food and things off campus, we couldn't buy in tools or things that we didn't realize we needed once we weren't able to go to the store. So I couldn't buy canning lids in September anyway because everybody was and their brother was canning things. So it was these were the parameters that we basically. And eat all the food that we grew. So sweet potatoes, onions, wheat, cucumbers, and like I said, our neighbors had an apple orchard that field, and we were able to get a lot of apples from that. So we got pretty lucky. I'm just going to check the side here, see if there's any questions. Any questions? No questions yet. Okay. Moving on. All right. So most of what we did, we are still in the process of editing and putting together videos on YouTube. So you're on YouTube watching me right now, you can click the subscribe button or just go right to our page and go to the Foodmageddon playlist, and it will have everything. Right now we have 33 videos on there. And each one is kind of set up like it's a documentary into a parallel universe where fossil fuels have collapsed. So we don't say, if fossil fuels disappeared, we couldn't go to the grocery store. We say, because fossil fuels disappeared, we haven't been to the grocery store in 3 months, things like that. So it's kind of like a window into a parallel dimension. So yeah, feel free to go to the Foodmageddon playlist and see some things. I'm going to kind of go through some clips from there and talk about what we did, our gardening. I'm trying to focus as much as I can on gardening, as this is the Gardening Expo. So I'm going to run through a couple of clips here. The first one is about maple syrup, because one thing we need to think about is, where are we going to get sweetener? We don't need, most of us have too much sweets in our diet as it is, but in a scenario where you can't just go to the store and buy sugar, you either need maple syrup or honey. Because those are the two easiest forms to get sugar. And that's actually why we started keeping bees, was because we wanted a source of sweetener. Then we happened to buy a house where across, showed you, I'm looking right now at our maple grove across the street that's on the town park, the town commons, and I was able to tap maple trees there. So let's have a real quick look at that. hopefully this works.
Maple syrup season is in full swing, so I can be outside boiling down the sap. Every 2 days, I pop over here, my little cart, and grab all of the sap. On the other days, well, honestly now every day I'm boiling. My goal is 4 gallons. Because that's a lot of calories that we can use all winter.
And we actually ended up making about 4 gallons, which was thousands and thousands of calories, and we still have about now in February, we still have probably 1.5 gallons, maybe 2 gallons. So it was a good amount for the year for us. We did buy in some sugar before we weren't able to go to the grocery store anymore, and we still have a fair amount of that. So we are actually doing pretty well on sweetener, although if we were to go 2-3 years, it would be a much less calorie-rich diet. But the big thing wasn't actually sugar, it was oil that we started running out of because we don't have the wherewithal to make vegetable oil. So, we're dependent on animal oil, and we really don't have the good animals for that. Cows, sheep, goats, things like that we can milk and then use butter. So that would be one of our major sticking points that we found during the year. So now let's talk about fencing, because if you are gardening, especially out in the country, you know that animals really like to get into your tasty little crops. And we have a big problem with deer and raccoons specifically out here.
I'm putting in 2 posts. This will hold up the 6-foot netting, and then there's going to be another post here, and that's going to hold up the electric fence. And this is around the back 40 to keep out deer, raccoons, and rabbits, which are the scourge of what I grew here last year. Here I have a wire that I'm attaching a net to, a deer net, and down here I have the electric fence posts. So I need to hang up the netting and string the electric wire. Hopefully before it starts raining or it gets dark. I've also been prepping a few beds.
Alright, so yeah, it actually worked out really well. I used some information from I think it was the Vermont Cooperative Extension. They did a study around soybean fields where they put an electric fence at 3 feet high to keep deer out. And you might be thinking, how do you keep a deer out with a 3-foot fence? Well, they put little bits of tinfoil with peanut butter in it, and then the deer would come and they'd smell the peanut butter and they'd go and nose up to the fence, and it would zap them, and they would realize, ooh, this fence is dangerous. And so they wouldn't, even though they could sail over a 3-foot fence with no problem, they stayed away from the fence, even when it was off. So, I put this 3-foot fence around our back 40, and this year we didn't have any deer or raccoons get in. So that was excellent. It worked out really well. So now we're going to look at a clip of getting some of my plants started. We had to start all of our own plants. We couldn't depend on nurseries to go buy our plants, so we had to start them all. We had to start them all ourselves. We've been doing this for most years, but this year we really had to ramp it up to meet all of the needs that we had growing our own food here.
So I have some lettuce that's grown up. starting to get leggy, which means it's got these long stalks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to transplant them into their own little individual cells and then let them grow up and get a little bigger. I've got Freckles lettuce as well as Roche d'Hiver that I'm going to be transplanting here. There, maybe down there. Once this gets a little more compact, it breaks the surface tension of the water. Thanks to Tony Brescia in St. Louis for that tip. I've been using a spray bottle for watering starts like this for a while now, and yeah, it definitely makes a difference, because if you just pour water on there, there's a surface tension on the soil and just kind of uniformly damp, and now I could pour water on there. That would be no problem. So that's a nice little extra tip. Each morning when I water all the plants, I spray them first just to get a uniform moisture on the surface. And now my onions are long enough that they need a haircut. Because if I let them keep growing like this, they become leggy and they tip over. So anytime they get longer than 3 inches, I trim them down to about 1 inch, and then they'll spring back up.
Maybe you should point out
that I don't have luck with onions? Yeah, I talked about that in a previous episode. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, so again, I had to end up buying in some bulbs, and also my neighbor Susan, who I see in the chat there, hey Susan, gave me some extra onion starts, and all of my successful onions were from those. I'm still having trouble. I'm about to plant my onions for this year again from seed, with very little hope for any success. So if you have a surefire, never fails way to grow onions from seeds, please share it with me. I'd love to, or put it out on the blog. If you'd like to write it up or share it with me with photos and a how-to to plant onions from seeds, I would really, really, really love to see that. So get in touch. You can get in touch with me, Scott at lowtechinstitute.org. You can go to our website, again, lowtechinstitute.org. Find us on Instagram, Facebook, all those things. So yeah, please be in touch. And if you have an onion secret, please don't be shy and share it with us. This spring was also a lot of fun because we kept a rooster last year from my mother-in-law works at a farm in urban or suburban Chicago. And it's kind of a working farm so that kids in the city can see a farm working. And they got a whole bunch of chickens dropped off in a shopping bag about 4 weeks after Easter. It turns out somebody had had some chicks for Easter for their family, and then once they started fledging, they became ugly. And they donated them by dropping them off at night at this farm. So I got a text message from my mother-in-law saying, "Do you want these chickens?" 3 of them happened to be roosters. And we kept one of them, and he was big, barred rock, beautiful rooster named Sid. And so we got fertilized eggs this year, and we decided to hatch them, which was a lot of fun. We've hatched chickens before, but it's been a few years, and it's always an exciting thing. We're probably not going to hatch our own chickens this year unless some of our own chickens decide to sit on the eggs and hatch them themselves. If the chickens want to do all their own work, fine. But we're probably not going to hatch them out in the house again this year. But we probably will again in a future year. And we did live stream that. You can actually find it in our videos. If you scroll through our videos, you can find the chicks hatching on live stream. There's 8 hours of chickens hatching, and then 8 hours of little chicks running around and being adorable. So let's see some of those guys hatch out. And
push. Come on.
Come on, chickie. And wiggle out.
Yeah. Another black one.
That's how it was last time. Remember, it was all black ones in the beginning.
Yay! Look at him breathing hard.
That was so much work, huh?
Yay!
You got a friend now.
Hi and welcome. It's the beginning of April and we're really enjoying spring. As you saw, we have chickens hatching, so that's really exciting. We are also working on the fence line. 3 black, 1 yellow. And the 3 black ones hatched early this morning, so they're ready to come out of the incubator. The yellow one just hatched, so he or she is going to stay for the rest of the night there. We have a couple more eggs that have pipped but haven't hatched yet, so their lungs are adjusting to air and all that, so they may or may not come on out the next 24 hours, and hopefully the rest of these will also pip and start coming out. So let's see as we move these black ones to their new habitat. So yeah, we're really excited about the chickens coming out. Our hatch rate wasn't as good as we would have liked. My big goal this year was to have 3 times a day rotate all the eggs and make sure that everything is the right temperature and humidity and all that. I wouldn't have had to do that. And now I have another 6 weeks of babysitting these chicks to do that the mother isn't doing because none of the heads went broody. So what I have here is a box with a heat lamp, and the heat lamp heats the space under it to about 100 degrees. 95 to 100 degrees. And the box is big enough that if they get warm, they can run away from the lamp, and if they get cold, they can go under the lamp. And this is going to be their home for the next 5-6 weeks, so maybe I'll move them out to the garage if I can. But also, you know, super dangerous fire hazard in the house, a cardboard box with a heat source in it, not a great thing. I have a smoke detector right here. But again, not ideal. Really wish the hens would brood. Maybe next year. So as I bring each one into the new enclosure, I have to dip its beak in water because otherwise it won't know to drink there. I mean, how would they know? They don't have a mother to show them where to drink. And another thing you notice, there's no food in here. And that's because if I give them food, they might eat a whole bunch of food. And then they get what's called, without water, rehydrates in their intestines, and then they get an obstructed bowel. And so we have to give them water for about 24 hours, and then after they have water flowing through their system, then we can feed them. So as long as one of them...
So we got, we had pretty good luck with the chickens this year. We had 7 hatch out, or 8 hatch out, and 7 made it to adulthood. 3 of them were roosters and ended up coming to dinner because we can't have that many roosters. It's not good for the flock cohesion. They only need 1 rooster for the size of flock we have. So we actually did a video on that. Our recent video was on butchering the chickens and how we did that in hopefully what is the most, you know, quick and painless way for them, because we obviously raise them from chicks. We don't want to put them through extra harm. So yeah, I know meat's a complicated issue. We actually have a podcast that we talked about meat. That's episode 8 in the Low Tech Podcast, which you can find on all the typical podcast outlets, Google Play, Stitcher, iTunes, all that. So if you're interested in a podcast, we have one of those. It hasn't been as active as we'd like in the recent past, but it should be coming back. All right, so let's get back to gardening stuff, specifically gardening stuff. Although the chickens are garden workers for us, they do dig through a lot of the beds. Their droppings become fertilizer for us. We have a lot of uses where we circulate the chickens through an area to really tear it up, to destroy weeds, to eat starts of weeds and things like that. They're actually integral to our garden. Not just giving us eggs and meat. And also my 2-year-old son likes to chase them around, but they're much faster than him. So next we're going to actually move over next door where our neighbors used to be market gardeners, and they had given us some space. Oh, that's coming up soon. We're going to go back to the greenhouse to have a look at the starts as they go into there. Get that up and running. And here we go.
To have a functioning greenhouse, and I finally do. Getting all these out of the house. This is pretty exciting. In addition to working on the greenhouse, I've also been continuing to make garden beds. It's almost a never-ending process in the spring because we have to get all the cardboard out, all the mulch out, compost and everything else that we need to do. So it's been busy, and it's extra hard because we have less gasoline available. So this month I basically have 1 tank of gas for my truck to get all the mulch, all the compost, all the cardboard, everything I need for the garden this month. I only have 1 tank to get it with, and I have no idea how much gas I'm going to have next month if all of this continues. Hi! Hi! Yes, you're such a ham. You're such a ham. Today we are out here to get some beds ready for the peas. The peas are sprouted, they're coming up, they're ready to be transplanted soon. I got to whip these beds into shape. So let's do a quick discussion of what I have here. And the point of doing all this, of course, is to keep my weed load down. It also builds soil. I'm not churning it up. This is called no-dig gardening. If I turn it up and I destroy everything that's in it, it also, the fungal life, all the things that make soil get disturbed when you deep till it. That's why I'm doing this no-dig method where I cover everything up and mulch soil here, and that's because I've been doing this for 3 years now. As I said, this is year 3 of no-dig gardening, so let's just have a look. So these are cilia. These grow they're kind of invasive. They grow all over the neighborhood. Farther, you see we have pretty good, we have good soil all the way down. And a lot of this is originally clay, but because we just pile on more organic matter every year and smother it, we're really able to keep the organic content high. And even though I put in cardboard on, I'm going to plant through the cardboard. So this is the medium I'm going to be planting into. And as I'm hoeing this all together to prepare the bed for the year, I get any incipient invasives that I see. I saw some wild parsnip over there and some others. So I try and prepare it as much as I can before covering it up. And each year there's a less and less weed load. I'll see if I can rough up a picture of what this looked like before invasive trees and brush. All of this that I'm putting on will break down and become soil next year. And so I have my 2 pathways covered by straw. And if we move over here, you can see how we're making it. So we've got, these are the sides of the bed, pushed off to the side. This will be a pathway. It's going to be filled with mulch. And then this is the next bed that hasn't been worked yet. I'm going to pull last year's pathway onto it that's rotted now, cover it with cardboard, cover it with straw, put the sides on, and it will be a good bed just like all the rest of them.
Alright, so there you can see some of our no-dig bed, and we're going to do even more of that this year. We've been doing that pretty much every year we've been here, and the beds that I get enough cardboard to cover need almost no weeding. It's you know, significantly more work. Maybe. It depends what you do. If you have a tiller and you till it all up, it's maybe a similar amount of work, I guess. But if you do it double digging by hand, this is less work, and then there's no weeding. Not no weeding, but very little weeding. And so the method that I use, that I'll show in another video, is actually poking a hole through the cardboard and planting in that hole. And that works for some plants, especially plants you've started. I haven't had as much luck planting seeds through and having them work well. But if they're pre-started, it's not bad. I don't get a lot of weeds growing up through the gap. But if I do make a gap in the cardboard and then plant like I did with my peas, I had a lot of weed growth with the peas. So it either complete smother with just a little hole where you put the start through, or what I'm going to actually do this year, if we get the next government stimulus, I'm going to buy a whole bunch of mulch, or excuse me, of compost, because my compost system isn't big enough to give me yards and yards of compost, and I just want to get one big smother this year. So I'm going to buy some compost. I'm actually going to follow Charles Dowding. If you don't know Charles Dowding, check him out on YouTube. I have links to him in basically all my videos. But he's an English market gardener, and he does no-dig smothering, and amazing results. Just if you need to be inspired for your gardening this year, look up Charles Dowding, Dowding, on YouTube. Really worth it. But yeah, so I'm going to put down mulch. I'm going to put down cardboard, and then I'm going to mulch it with as much compost as I can buy in a reasonable amount of money this year. And then put straw on top of that. The straw really keeps the moisture in, which isn't always a problem here in Wisconsin, but in those couple of weeks where we do need to water in the summer, I almost don't need to at all because that mulch keeps the moisture in a lot better. It also keeps the soil from getting compact because it's not being buffeted by the environment all summer. Plus, when it rains, it's not hitting bare soil and then bouncing fungus and bacteria up onto the plants. And this is especially useful in tomatoes, I've found. If I trim the bottom foot of the tomato plant and I have straw down, I don't get as much fungal transmission. I still get some. I don't use hybrids, so I don't have as much rigor as probably a lot of you do with your tomatoes. One thing I'm not showing today is my tomato fertilizer. I'm following a Finnish study that used urine and ash. Urine and ash as a tomato fertilizer, and it actually worked out really well. And this year, as part of a new series we're doing called Low Tech R&D, we're actually doing kind of Mythbusters type studies, short little kind of neat looks at different things. And one of them is going to be comparing no fertilizer, store-bought fertilizer, and urine and ash with tomatoes. So we're going to have 3 groups of tomatoes. We're going to compare them with these 3 different fertilizer regimes, and then we are going to weigh the dry mass once they're cut and dried at the end of the year to see which one grew the biggest plants. We're going to log the yield, so we're going to know which ones yield more and which ones qualitatively look better. So check out Low Tech R&D on our webpage, lowtechinstitute.org. I'll say it again just in case there's new people. And then also on YouTube, if you subscribe to us, you'll see these Low Tech R&D videos coming up in your feed fairly often, I hope. So yeah, we have a couple of really interesting ones coming out. I should plug another one we're going to do. We just got USDA funding. We just found out this week we got USDA funding to do a study on what I'm calling hot box compost. So picture a box that's 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet, so it's a yard, and inside the box is compost feed, and then it has tubes through it that blow air, so you don't need to turn this compost. It's a static aerated pile is what it's called. And what that does is it pushes oxygen through, and then carbon dioxide and nitrates and moisture and heat are pushed out of it, and they're pushed up into a grow bed at the top. And then they have this carbon dioxide and nitrates seeping through it. And so they're fertilizing heated and moisture from below. And the idea is you can put these in a greenhouse in the winter and grow cold hardy greens in them all winter, and they're going to be fed from below. And on top of that, you're building a yard of compost every month. And so you can pull that out and then put it in your beds. So we just got USDA funding for that, so stay tuned for more information about that. Okay, so now let's move on to talk about my favorite crop, which is potatoes. We had a former USDA study on this that I'll talk about here in the clip, and I do go through the results really quickly. We have a full-length video on this on the YouTube page, so check that out. I'm also giving a talk, I believe it's this evening at 6 o'clock, that's called How Potatoes Will Save Humanity, and how important potatoes are for a sustainable local agriculture in our future, I hope and I think. So, okay, let's check out a real quick clip on potatoes once I get that up and running. And I hope these are coming through clearly. Feel free to let me know in the questions. While this is running, I'll check and see if there's any questions that I need to answer.
So just behind my flax field over here, I've got my potatoes. This is one of a few potato fields I'm making. The idea here, right now there's piles of some rows that I've dug in with the reel hoe. And what I'm going to do now is put the straw down between the rows. And that is hoping to smother the incipient growth that we have here, leave the rows open. I'll plant the potatoes, put down compost, turn them all together, and then I will move this mulch over on top of the potatoes to hill them up. I grow my potatoes on the surface, and the reason I do that is because I conducted a study with 10 market gardeners in southern Wisconsin. And we tried all kinds of different methods, 5 to be exact, different methods of growing potatoes. Growing them on the surface under straw mulch, under newspaper and straw mulch, digging them in, hilling them up like traditionally, growing them in grow bags. And we found that planting them on the surface is probably your best bet if you have space, because it takes the least amount of energy for you to dig up each pound. Of planting them on the surface is half as much work as digging them into the ground, while it is only a small percentage less productive in terms of tubers per square foot. A video about this, and I will link to that here. You can check that out if you're interested in learning more about the potato study that we did. But suffice it to say, we plant on the surface with some compost and mulch. Well, that's all we have for this week.
All right, there we go. So yeah, our potatoes did pretty well. We ended up planting 1,000 potato plants with our neighbor in another plot. And the thought was, in the spring, we didn't know how COVID was going to turn out. So just like if we had an actual disaster in the food system, if we needed to potentially be giving our neighbors a lot of food this fall, potatoes are the best way to do it. For the amount of work you do and the amount of calories you get, potatoes are easily the most efficient crop, period. Better than wheat, better than anything else. So I'll talk about that here. Hopefully I'll have time to pop down, and I'll show you actually how many calories I ended up growing, and potatoes were a big part of our vegetable production. We also had access to a hoop house, and I started saying this before, but we were able to grow in our neighbor's hoop house, and so we took advantage of that to grow a lot of tomatoes and cucumbers. So let's get to that. We'll pop over there and have a look in the greenhouse.
Time to plant tomatoes. My neighbor, who used to be a market gardener, still has high house, this hoop house, and he's letting us use a little bit of space in here. But today, I'm going to be transplanting all these tomatoes into a couple of rows next to this trellis, and this will be a good chunk of our tomatoes for the year.
So there in that final shot, you saw our in-ground greenhouse, which is called a wallopini. And if you go to the garden tours, I can't believe I haven't mentioned this yet, on the Garden Expo website, we are featured as one of the 8 gardens that they. If you go there, if you scroll down about 3/4 of the way down, there is a 3D rendering of the interior of that greenhouse now in the winter. And so you can click on the walls and get different information on the plaster and our mass heater, which is a wood stove, which keeps it warm. And you can see our starts and our compost in there. So yeah, have a look on the garden. All the garden tours are fantastic. So I didn't know I was going to be doing this garden tour, so I didn't take as many glamour shots as I should have of my garden this year. Most of my recording was video. So, but yeah, have a look at that. There's a lot of great gardens there. The Ulbrich Gardens, another couple backyard gardens also. So definitely worth a look. Okay, the next thing we're going to look at are planting out some starts, and I'll talk a little bit about how I plant through that cardboard and that mulch. So let's get to that. Doop, doop, doop. the right video coming up next. Fingers crossed.
So my greenhouse is looking pretty good. My beans look great. They're really ready to be planted out, but like I said, it's going to freeze. Cilantro, parsley, my greens are looking good. Got some cabbage here. Yet again, my onions, and I do not know why. I try and keep them wet. I try and keep them watered. Maybe I overwater them. I don't know. And up here, I've got cabbages and broccolis, cauliflowers that are actually looking like plants that are going to work. Here we've got cucumbers. They're ready to go in the greenhouse next door. And I have a whole bunch of lettuce ready to be planted out. I have so much stuff it's ready to be planted out, but with the coming freeze this weekend, I have to wait a little longer, and they're kind of outgrowing their pots, and I don't want to up-pot them because that's just so much work for, you know, just a couple of days. So hopefully they can hang on and it's not going to be too detrimental. So usually when we come in the greenhouse, I like to show you this side because it's got the plaster or the cob wall and the shelves and things. But here, let me turn the camera around and you can see just the...
Yeah, we don't need to get too far into that. It's a mess, but yeah, I want to try and stay as much on topic as we can. I want to mention that this year, instead of using, I will use some of the plastic pots, but you know, they are plastic. They wear out over time. I actually got a soil packer. It makes little cubes of compressed soil that you can plant into, and so. We actually have a low-tech tool library. So if you are near us out here, we're south of Madison, about a half hour, in the little historic village of Cooksville. But if you are out in this area, you can come and borrow tools from us. And one of the tools I'll make available this year is that the soil compactor that makes little 2-inch squares that you can plant right into, and then it's not even a pot, right? It's just the clump of soil that sticks together because of the way that you make it, and then you can plant that right in the ground. It air prunes the roots so it doesn't get pot bound. It's just fantastic. According to the internet, we'll see how it goes, but it looks like a pretty useful system. But we have one available, and we'll make it available on our tool library. Also on our tool library are all kinds of other gardening tools. So if you have friends coming over and you need an extra shovel, or we have a seeder, things like that. So we do lend these out on our tool library. So feel free to visit that part of our website, lowtechinstitute.org/tool-library for more information on that. So we really like to point people towards that to lend out things. All right, and now on to planting through the cardboard. And I'll show you planting lettuce, and this works so well I don't have to weed it at all, and every gardener loves weeding so much. I'm sure they'll all be disappointed that they have less time to weed their plants.
All right, now we got lettuce. Now you might be thinking, hey, this looks like a lot more work to plant lettuce than I do. I just till my garden and then plant lettuce seeds. I just thin them to the distance and space I want. You seem like you have to do a couple extra steps here, and that's absolutely true. This is more work. There is an inverse proportion between efficiency and production. The more time you put in, the more product you can get out of it, often up to a point. Obviously there's diminishing. You know, these 9 plants came from 9